On this day, the 19th of January, 1795, the Batavian Republic was proclaimed, replacing the old Dutch Republic. This republic was proclaimed under French occupation, and it would last until Napoleon would put his brother on the Dutch throne in 1806. Years before the French Revolution, during the American War of Independence, the Fourth Anglo-Dutch War took place. This took place because the Dutch had continued trading with the Americans against the wishes of the British. This led to war in which the Dutch were defeated and humiliated. The Patriot Party was a group of radicals in Holland, and they used this defeat as an excuse to rebel against the Stadtholder William V of Orange. William V was a member of the House of Orange who had been, in effect, the kings of the Dutch Republic. It was a hereditary post, and the Patriot Party wanted to remove him and all vestiges of the old order. The rebellion was easily crushed, and many of the Patriots fled to France. A few years later, luckily for these Patriots, the French Revolution began. The Patriots were fully in support of the French Revolution and were hoping that they could use this revolution to liberate their own country. During the winter of 1894 to 1895, French revolutionary forces fought against the Austrians, first in what is now Belgium, then invaded Holland. The Patriots were with them and helped the French occupy Holland. Well, when I say Holland, it was the United Provinces of the Netherlands, which was a confederation. As the French were invading the Netherlands, revolution broke out in many Dutch cities. Many Dutch people saw this as a reason, an excuse to rise up and use what was happening in France to impose their own revolution in their own country. William fled to England on the 18th of January aboard a fishing boat, to get away from the revolution that was engulfing his country. The next day, the Batavian Republic was proclaimed. Although the French had come as liberators, in many ways, at many times, they acted as conquerors. One of the first things they insisted upon was that the new Batavian Republic would pay for an occupation force of 25,000 French troops. Now, this was going to be done because it had to be done. Many of the reforms that followed this were actually initiated by the Dutch themselves, and what they came up with, or what they ended up with, was probably the most democratic state in Europe at the time, with a very liberal constitution. Another thing that they aimed for was the abolition of the Confederacy and the creation of a unitary state. One of the problems with the old Dutch Republic is that because of the Confederation, the central government couldn't impose direct taxation. Only the states themselves could do so. So one of the things they needed to do was get rid of these states so that they could impose uniform taxation on the whole country. The States General was replaced with the National Assembly. And in the National Assembly, a lot of Orangists, or conservatives, opposed the measures that the radicals were trying to bring in. Their first constitution was put to a plebiscite, and it was defeated. So when the radicals became in charge of France itself, they very clearly said to the Dutch, we're in no mood for this democratic nonsense. So the conservatives were expelled from the National Assembly. Some of them were arrested, and all of the radical reforms were passed at once. Later on, as the revolution continued, Holland became a battleground between the Prussians and the English and the French. They attempted to negotiate with the English and the French to become neutral once more. They were willing to allow a part of the Netherlands to be occupied by the British and another part to be occupied by the French. The French weren't impressed with this, and so that was quickly shelved. And after this, when Napoleon came into power as the first consul, he very quickly wanted the Dutch to get rid of that whole democratic thing. He wasn't very fond of it. And over the years, he became less fond of the Dutch and their democratic government. In 1806, he got so sick of it that he put his brother, Louis Bonaparte, upon the newly created throne of the Batavian kingdom. And that was a role that he would play for 4 years until Napoleon became sick of even that and annexed the Netherlands into the French Empire. The Batavian Republic, it was a radical, democratic, liberal government which was too radical and too liberal for the revolutionary French. They went too far, too quick, and they overstepped the mark when it came to what the French wanted, which was basically control over the Netherlands. They didn't like their independence, they didn't like their democracy, and finally, they just got rid of them altogether. But it would be remembered in the Netherlands, and in 1848, after the revolution, and a constitutional monarchy was established, the memory of this time and this radical democracy would influence this new constitution 50 years later. Okay, if you like these videos, come back for more tomorrow. Like, subscribe, and leave a comment.